in our culture, we just think if you're caring, well, yeah, of course you have to. That's just what you do. And it mostly falls upon women. We really need to value caregiving as a job and get paid for caregiving. It is all encompassing and it requires a lot. It requires a lot of emotional, mental, financial resources.
Welcome to A Place of Yes, a podcast about how I moved through my darkest hour. And for me, that was in channeling my grief into good. Welcome to the show. We are here today with Jessica Patay, founder and executive director of We Are Brave Together, a nonprofit dedicated to serving and supporting caregiving moms, which I want to stop right there because that in and of itself is making me so excited to talk to you. I can't think of a more important role or job or needed community in our rare mom, medically fragile, medically challenged group. So I wanted to start by thank you for doing it.
You're so welcome. It's, it's my passion project. I have a son with a rare disease and I know how desperately we need each other. And that community is really the only way through.
It's awesome. It's awesome. You are also the host of Brave Together Parenting Podcast, a contributor to the Becoming Brave Together book, which I have here, which I loved. Some of your contributors within the book have been guests on the show. So I wanted to start with hoping that you would share kind of the reason behind everything. You are Ryan's mom. He has Prader-Willi syndrome. And if you could share with the audience a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have 3 kids, Luke, who's 24, Ryan, who is 21, and Kate, who's 19. When Ryan was born, he could not suck. He couldn't move. He didn't cry. We spent a month in the hospital not knowing what was wrong. He had medical issues, and thankfully he was diagnosed at 5 weeks of age. So we got an early diagnosis, jumped into a couple of the organizations, national, and there's one in California that supports families like ours. Thankfully, I know that is not the case for everyone who has a child with a rare disease, but they were there to support us and educate us. And we went to our first support group when he was 2 months old, went to our first conference a few months later, and they've been a part of our lives ever since. Prader-Willi syndrome is the early years are all about milestones because babies are born with low muscle tone, hypotonia. And so you're focused on speech, you're focused on PT, you're focused on OT. So fine motor, gross motor, and speech skills, communication skills in the early years. And eventually, they catch up. It's different for everyone. And PWS is a spectrum. Ryan was very, very low tone. So he needed a feeding tube his first year of life.
And for people who aren't sure, like low tone, like they kind of floppy, like sometimes,
floppy
you know what I mean? Yeah, floppy baby. Yep.
Right. So that means it's not just you have less muscle, but it's the muscle's ability to activate. And so they have to learn everything. They have to be taught everything. Ryan didn't walk till he was 3. And that was even being on growth hormone. That was even with early intervention. He just was very low tone and it took him a very long time. And then in childhood, there's this crazy symptom called hyperphagia that kicks in. So kids and adults do not have any satiety signals. They never feel full. They never feel satisfied when they eat. Because of that, it turns into this food-seeking behavior. Because if you feel like you're hungry all the time, you haven't had enough food, and there's an underlying obsessiveness and anxiety that come with Prader-Willi syndrome, just leads to this crazy food-seeking behavior. And so we live with a locked kitchen. We didn't have to do it till Ryan was 13. I thought it was going to hit around 5 or 6 or 7. But for him, I say it was a slow burn. His increased interest in food just kind of incrementally went up through the years. And then by the time he was 13, I was like, okay, we found 7 wrappers of 7 protein bars under his bed. Okay.
You're there. We're here.
It's time.
How did it show when he was younger? So did you just keep him on a routine schedule of eating or?
Always.
Because I know this is such a silly thing to say, right? But when you're really hungry, you're like, when am I going to get my next meal?
Right.
When am I going to eat?
Right.
So if that must be the constant if you feel hungry all the time.
Ryan doesn't say he's hungry, thankfully, all day long, but that's how it feels if you don't feel that satisfaction, right, of being full. Because we got an early diagnosis and we got all the education possible, we knew that Ryan always had to be on a food schedule. So he's been on a food schedule since he was born. The early years, it was because he didn't cry for food. He did not demand food. He was a very mellow, sleepy baby. If he didn't ask for food, he wouldn't get it, right? If we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Or eventually we'd be like, he's not eating enough. He's not gaining weight. What's going on with our baby?
No, but that's
But we
always, they
knew right
cried,
away.
you feed them. Yeah.
We knew in the first 24 hours, he's not waking up. He doesn't cry. He doesn't cry if he's wet. He doesn't cry if he's unhappy. He doesn't cry if he's hungry. It's called failure to thrive. Also, the inability to really suck or nurse. Ryan's been on a schedule since he was born. And then once we learned about having a food schedule and what that should look like, we have followed that for, almost 22 years. And so it's breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, and he gets a sip of milk before bedtime. No bedtime snack, no nighttime snacks, no seconds, because kids with this syndrome, kids and adults, tend to have low metabolism. So it's a double whammy. You want to eat all the time and you get loose food than everybody else. So it's crazy. He's also affected, psychologically, cognitively, academically, behaviorally. So there's medical stuff, and then there's all the others too.
So I was thinking, so he's your second. So you knew right away that something was different. Is that safe to say or no?
With the first day, I was just kind of in that glow of, I'm having my second baby. He was having breathing issues when he came out, so they whisked him away. His testicles were undescended, which I knew one is not abnormal, but to have both, I was like, huh. But what stood out to me about his birth is when he came out, and I just had a vaginal birth, just like with Luke, he cried for just a few seconds. And I was like, huh, I wonder if he's just an easy, mellow newborn. And then the next day when my pediatrician came back, he's like, all right, we're going to start running a bunch of tests. Did you have an amnio? No, I didn't have an amnio. I was only 33 when I had Ryan, so I didn't really feel the need. Off we went. And I was like, okay, everyone is really concerned now.
Okay, this is different.
This is real.
Different. Maybe not the right word, but I do love that you were able to get that diagnosis quickly and then find a community quickly. This is such a weird thing to say, but I've always been a little bit jealous of that. So
Sure.
my son, Jake, was, he's my second, and he was born very healthy, just easy, kind of almost like what you said. I was like, okay, just an easy kid.
Yeah.
But at 8 months, he had a seizure out of nowhere, very atypical seizure. I always say, at that point, I knew nothing about this rare medical world. We ended up with this long hospital stay at Boston Children's, and he lost all of his milestones, but we never got a diagnosis. And it's always been something that even now, he's been gone almost 14 years. He's been gone a long time, but it's still it just feels heavy. It feels hard. It feels like, I'm like, what happened? What did it? Could I have done something differently?
When I lived in the hospital with Ryan, this was before smartphones, so I didn't look anything up, but I also didn't want to. Then when we did get the diagnosis, it put us on a path. Okay, what's next? Okay, thankfully there was a PWS expert, an endocrinologist in LA at the time at UCLA. Okay, great. We'll get started on growth hormone.
You could have your list and we're doing this and we're doing that.
Yeah. Things to do. We had a plan. The most comforting part, though, was that within a few days of diagnosis and calling the Prader-Willi California Foundation and the national organization, I got a phone call. I call it the Lisa phone call. And she called to tell me that she was going to be my mentor and that I was, I was able to call her at any time and ask her anything. And I just exhaled so much anxiety and fear because I had somebody who was ahead of me in the journey. Her son was about 5 years older. I knew that we weren't going to be alone, that there were other families in Southern California that we could meet with.
It's not the same, but I remember as you were talking about that in that call, I remember coming home. So we spent 117 days in the hospital and, came home with this very different baby than we had left with. And I just remember being like, what do I do now? What is going on? What's going to happen? And we got affiliated, and it wasn't a great match always, but it was an organization like the Epilepsy Foundation of Northeastern New York hooked up with us. And while we were sort of a way more extreme case than most of the families they worked with, there was something in that. Mm-hmm. And I just remember my husband and I kind of taking a deep breath and saying okay, that's important. We need to We need to lean into that a little bit.
It is. It is. And it's the sense of belonging, right? We all, it's our birthright to have a sense of belonging as human
Yeah.
beings. And when you're given a child or a crisis or a situation that doesn't put you in the mainstream
Yeah.
pool of humans, and we all want a place to belong that feels safe, that's comforting, that's uplifting, that's supportive, that's helpful. We all deserve that. We all knew
No,
that
and
as
and we
humans.
all and we're better with it, right? Like that's
Yes.
one of the things too that I think has taken me a longer time. And one of the things with the organization that we do, with Jake's Help from Heaven and with this podcast, what I have benefited so much, first with the organization and now with this kind of together, is these conversations, right? It's that we are not alone, that we have other people with shared experiences. I love in the introduction of your book where you talk about the loneliness of onlyness.
Mm.
If I'm saying that right. Like, because
Mhm.
I highlighted it because I was like, that resonated so deeply. I think that is the piece that for so long and for so many people, unfortunately, is missing. And what you're doing is making a home for it. And I think these conversations that we have is just so important for people to take that sigh you talked about, sort of that
Yes.
exhale of
Yes.
just like, okay, there's a place for me.
Which is why in We Are Brave Together, and I know we'll get to that, we're all inclusive. And so every diagnosis under the sun, and even if your child has medical, behavioral, educational, psychological struggles, and there's no diagnosis or box to check, you are welcome. And we have a chair waiting for you.
I love it. So it's a perfect time. Like, let's get into the group, into We Are Brave Together. So you started that in 2017.
Well, I mean, the why is because Ryan made me a caregiver, and I knew how stressful and different and altered and wonderful and beautiful and crazy all of it is. It's just so different than just typical parenting. And I had started writing, blogging back when blogging was a thing in 2012, and being really candid, really honest. And I would get all these beautiful messages. Thank you so much for saying what I'm afraid to say out loud. I feel so seen. I feel so validated. I feel this resonates with my journey or my experience. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so that really made me feel like I had a voice, and I'm a natural gatherer and a connector. And I was always someone who did girls' trips, through marriage and, babies and just crises and all of it.
Yeah.
And my best friend and I started doing these fluffy girlfriends retreats where we would invite friends and friends of friends, whoever wanted to come, kind of an intimate gathering, like 12 to 20 people. And we met in different places, and we'd hire a speaker, and we didn't do it to make money.
Yep.
We made no money, and we spent a lot of
Yep.
money to do it, but it was just so much fun. And we believe in the power of gathering women together. And when you leave the competition and cattiness and comparison behind, that the intersection of our lives is a gift. And so one day in 2016, we were doing a retreat in Nashville. We looked at each other. We said, this is all well and good, but where could we really meet a need? And we're like, well, who needs a weekend off? But, moms who have kids with high
Yeah.
support needs. So the idea was birthed, and the name was birthed. And then I just started gathering interest. Who's interested in something like this? If I were to create a community, a support group, we'd have retreats. Who's interested? And just everyone kept saying me, 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 me. So we launched before even becoming a 501c3. I hadn't even started the paperwork, but it was just time. It was just
Yeah.
time. We needed to do it. And we launched with a party in my backyard, and 60 moms showed up from the area.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, clearly this is a need. Clearly we need to do something here. We followed up 2 months later with our first retreat and our first support group. And, just the response was overwhelming. So the next year we got our nonprofit status and started fundraising.
I love so much about what you said, and it's honestly so similar to like our journey when we started Jake's Help from Heaven. It didn't come out of experience, it came out of need. Like you said, it's not always the same disorders or diseases or syndromes, but there's a lot of us out there. I love everything you said. I love the idea of girls' trips, like all of the things that are very typical, right? Like there's very few people who don't love like going out with their girlfriends or catching up with their old friends or having that community and that bond. And then to apply it to not only a group that has those same needs, but doesn't always have the time. And you talk about it in your introduction. I think you call it like extreme caregiving or extreme
Right.
parenting or something, right? Because it's a different way, and it's not a different way by choice. It's a different way by necessity of
Right.
being a mother. I don't know, like I'm a mom to Ethan, and of course, when he has the flu, I'm his caregiver, but I'm not 100% his caregiver.
It is different, and we feel invisible and we feel marginalized and we feel isolated. And that's why I wanted to give voice, through the organization, through everything that we do, but also through the book. That's why we wanted to do our first book. We are going to do a second book
Oh,
where
okay.
that's
Awesome.
about to get in the works. And we want to shout the worth of caregiving and caregivers and share what extreme and extraordinary caregiving is all about. Because in our culture, we just think if you're caring, well, yeah, of course you have to. That's just what you do. And it mostly falls upon women. We really need to value caregiving as a job and get paid for caregiving. It is all encompassing, and it requires a lot. And it requires a lot of, emotional, mental, financial resources. I hope that, besides what we're trying to do to preserve and protect the mental health of caregiving moms, that we're really raising awareness about the care movement that does exist.
But it is that toll of the stress and the toll of keeping, because it's not, yes, all moms keep their kids alive, but it's very different when you are worrying about some of these things. And I remember those days with Jake. He was not keeping food down. He was throwing up. Like, is he going to aspirate? He can't readjust himself. If, just, it's a different kind of worry. And it's you're literally keeping your child alive. And that carries with it such a stress. And sometimes I think, at least what I did, and sometimes what other people did, is like you kind of bury that, right? You're like, I don't have time to think about that. I don't have time. This community where there are other people who, when you say something like that too, like the burden of keeping my child alive or the pressure of that, not everyone understands that.
It is. It's comforting. It's transformative. I say girlfriends who get you are sacred and mandatory.
Absolutely.
In this community or outside of this community, we have to have people who get us.
So I know for myself, there are countless moments where you feel alone. Do you have a story like in this where you knew you wish you had someone else? And because I'm sure that this community comes from a very personal need.
Yes. And this is actually about one of my other children, because once I got connected with other parents, moms who had kids with Prader-Willi syndrome, we had a text thread. We still have a text thread going. I think there's 6 or 7 of us, and I can reach out at any time with any question or anything that comes up. During the pandemic, it came to light that my daughter was suffering pretty badly with depression and anxiety. And as siblings do, they hide it. That is a topic for another podcast, and I'm
Absolutely
happy to come back to talk about siblings. I'm extremely passionate about their experience. But, in this country and in our culture, there's stigma around mental health struggles. And so who was I going to talk to about this? It was very scary. It was very severe. And it is its own version of heartbreak and hell when you have a child who's otherwise typical go through mental health stuff. It's just awful. And so I felt, obviously I had my husband who was in it with me always, but I needed a mentor who had walked through this before. And eventually I did find somebody. You can't talk about it on social media. Like most of the stories that I share about parenting are all related to Ryan. There's just not a lot of compassion and acceptance and empathy as much in this realm as it is when you say, my child has epilepsy, my child has a rare disease, my child has cancer, my child has diabetes, my child has autism. It's a hard journey as a parent, because there is so much comfort in sharing. You
said a couple things there, and I can relate to so much of that, right? It's that pit in your stomach where it's a different kind of worry too. It's so personal in a different way than if you're talking about like Ryan's story or if I'm talking about Jake's story. It's so personal to the person going through it, but as the mom, you're going through it in a different way, and it's such a hard balance. There's 2 things I want to, and I'm not sure which direction to go in. You opened it up so nicely, the sibling piece. And I do think the sibling piece is, I think about it all the time with my son, Ethan, who's 20 years old now. And, he was 5 when Jake died. So he's had a whole entire life, like all of his real formative teenage years have been without his brother. there's a hard pressure there, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a different kind of stress or anxiety or all of those things that come with it. Do
Mm-hmm.
you see that with Luke and with Kate?
Yes, I
Just
want to go back to Ethan because I think there's a way to maybe diffuse what you might feel if you feel like that he is living with a pressure, even though his
yeah,
sibling is gone, is just by being curious. Like it would be easy for other people to assume that because your brother isn't here and you're not living with us, in
yeah,
emergencies and crises and hospital visits and surgeries, that, you're not carrying a boulder on your shoulders. You're not
yeah.
carrying the weight of living right now with a sibling who's medically fragile and you've lost a brother. How does that feel for you now? And I think that would be a beautiful conversation.
It's such an important and great perspective and way to think about it. We focused in those years after Jake died so much so on the foundation and keeping Jake's memory alive and cheers to Jake and all of these things. And Ethan was young and kind of along for the ride and he liked it, right? Like he was like,
Sure.
oh, we're going to go see Jakey at the cemetery and these are balloons are for, like we would have these little routines. And then in the teenage years, I think it just became, their teenage years, I mean, but yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But they became more difficult. And then when he went to college, I had this moment, right, of like, holy crap, like he has processed and dealt with so much. And I have been in my personal loss that I have not really had those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't as open to them at 17, but all of a sudden, like 19 and now he's 20,
Mm-hmm.
we're having some of those conversations. And I have a little bit of guilt of like all that in between where we didn't.
Yes. I mean, and
It's,
there's so much time to repair and to discuss and go back and talk about it. I mean, I didn't have parents who ever were like, gosh, upon reflection, I can see that I did not have these conversations, or I didn't think about this, or I didn't think about that
yeah,
effect or impact. Like, can you imagine if our parents
yeah,
ever did that? But our adult kids, our young adult kids, we can have these conversations.
yeah.
We can go back and say, wow, like I'll send podcast episodes on parenting. I still listen to parenting podcasts, and I'll say, where was this episode when I was raising you guys? I'm horrified at some of the things that I did or said or
Yeah.
whatever. Like it's never too late.
It's it's a generational change in our generation, right? That, and we do have the control and power to do that.
Yeah. And I think you can say, like, you may not want to talk about any of this or all of this right now, but just know that I know
When,
there'll come a time when you do, and I'm all in, and you can say
yeah,
anything.
I will do that. I think that is a great suggestion. I think now I want to talk a little bit because this is kind of a nice connection too. So Jessica Troiano,
Mm-hmm.
who through the foundation, so over a decade, we have worked with the family, providing equipment, providing support. And one of the things that happens at Jake's Help from Heaven, which is not in our mission statement, we are an organization that provides, technology, adaptive equipment, medical travel reimbursement, like sort of tangible things.
Mm-hmm.
But a sort of sidebar that has come is a little bit like the community that you're talking about. For so many of our moms, mostly, they are always looking for someone that relates. I am someone that understands the road that they are on and the life that they're living,
Right.
and that that pit in your stomach about keeping your kid alive, like all of those emotions, I know. I was able to introduce the two of you together because you have members of We Are Brave Together in every state, correct?
Yes. Yes.
That's right. But you are predominantly have groups in California.
Our mission, like I said, is to preserve and protect the mental health of caregiving moms. And what we are doing is we are putting on support groups, virtual and in person, across the United States. And we call them connection circles. We also put on low-cost weekend retreats to give moms a weekend off, a time for mental health education, a time with other moms who get it. And they're intimate, 15, 16 moms.
Awesome.
We have a wonderful speaker at every retreat and retreat coordinator. We also have our podcast. And then our latest offering was the book that you mentioned. So back to connection circles, we have leaders all over the country. I think we're up to 30 plus, maybe 32.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Some of our connection circles are topical. So recently we launched 2 virtual connection circles, one for moms who have kids 22 and up, another one for moms who are going through divorce or who have been divorced. Jessica Jessica T, and I connected about her starting a group in Albany. And what that looks like is offering a place to meet on a monthly or every other month basis. So if anyone's listening and they're interested, well, gosh, I would like to start a little community, a little care group where I live, a connection circle where I live, then you can just reach out to us and we can walk you through the process and see if it's the right timing, the right fit.
I love it. And I love the name Connection Circle. I think that is just such a cozy, happy, like, it doesn't give like a, sometimes support group has a connotation to it or something. You know what I mean? Like,
It does.
but Connection Circle, I think just feels good. It feels great. And I'm so thrilled that Jessica is able to I felt strongly like when I connected you two, because I was like, I think this could be great for her. Part of what I love with the podcast and with social media nowadays and with all the things is that kind of like what we started saying in the beginning, the community, it just becomes much smaller and there's this overlap and there's this great synergy when all of us talk with each other and share our writing and share our thoughts, and it's just great. One of the things that you talked about was like sort of true self-care. I think a couple things. I think self-care is such a hot topic right now, right? Like for everybody. And I think for good reason. What are some takeaways for listeners here that you think are easy self-care ideas?
Let me back up and just say, before you even think about doing any kind of true self-care practices and then think about some of the obstacles to getting there, just please remember that you are worthy of investing in your own mental health. And true self-care is engaging in practices that light you up, that ground you, that keep you grateful, that bring you joy, bring you peace. So, there's a difference between self-comfort and self-care. Self-comfort is like Netflix, some dark chocolate, a glass of wine, getting your nails done. It's great in the moment and it's a relief and a distraction in the moment, but it will not sustain you for the long haul of caregiving. Really finding what that is. It could be deep breaths. Like I get up, I go sit on the couch in the morning, I put on some peaceful music, and I just put on a timer for 10 minutes and I sit there and I breathe. Writing in a journal, reading something inspirational. Those are easy things to do. Sitting outside in the sunshine and, feeling the grass with your feet. We do actually have a list of I think 100 bite-sized self-care suggestions on our website under our resources. So you're welcome to take advantage of that.
We'll have that in the show notes. Yeah, no.
Because, when you say self-care, somebody thinks, I got to join a gym. I got to join a yoga studio. I got to spend all this money. There's so many free things that you can do.
I love that. And it reminded me, honestly, even today. So today I was in one of those, I had a handful of things that were just not going right? It was like things were not working the way I wish they would and whatnot. Yep. So I was like, you know what? It's time to take a breather, right? I can either sit here and get more aggravated, or I went upstairs to our third floor. I have a Peloton there. I hopped on a 20-minute Peloton, a Lionel Richie ride. I was like, I want this to be I'm not, you know what I mean? I was like, I'm not necessarily in it for the cardio right now. I'm in it for clear my mind, right. Focus. And it was a 20-minute. Thank God I was home alone because I sang along to all the Lionel Richie songs. It was easy. Right. And I think that you are absolutely right. And not just doing it when we're in that moment like I was today, but making it a habit. And I love even just what you said, right? You get up in the morning, you put on the music, you set the timer, you've got 10 minutes. And that is just very important for us to respect our time and our worth enough to make time for that.
Scheduling it is important. Treat it like an appointment. Also, that I think what trips us up is the word self in there. Everyone seems to think that if the word self is in there, that it's selfish. It's not selfish to take care of your mental health.
Yep.
And you're in it for the long haul. So how are you going to put deposits in your mental, emotional, physical bank?
Effie Parks and I have had a few conversations, and one of them, she was like, it's just, you don't need all the expensive things that people think self-care is. It is make time every day to go for a walk. For those of us who might be inclined to think, like you said, that self-care is selfish or any of those things, in my mind, when I call it a non-negotiable, it changes it for me. It's like, okay, no, this is what I'm doing. And yes, I'm doing it for my well-being and my mental health, but it feels like, no, I have to do it, but in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Not in a way that puts pressure, the shoulds. this is nourishing me, just like food and water. And I think also really getting breaks is important. Now, I know that's a hot topic because everyone is in different circumstances and in different states where do you get respite hours covered by the state? Do you not?
Yeah.
Do you have a good agency? I mean, there's a massive shortage of respite care workers and respite nurses, all over the country. But I think also we have our own internal obstacles. Like we think we can never leave our child, that we do it best. Of course we do it best, but that doesn't mean we can't leave.
I think that's so important because it's so true. And I used to do it. I was like, I can't, I can't leave Jake. No one can do it. The what ifs could drive you nuts. It's such important stuff. Like we need the groups, we need the community, we need to believe that it's okay to do these things because it's not just okay, it's necessary.
It's necessary.
So we end this show, a segment called Ask Heather Anything. Do you have anything for me?
Well, I have two very different questions that come to mind. One is, what is the best thing that you can do for a mother who has lost a child?
This is, I have said this before, and it's so simple. Someone showed up in the couple weeks afterwards, sort of, because there's that period when everybody is showing up and bringing food and doing things. Once, the funeral has happened, the burial has happened, all of those things, there's just this really like Brian's gone back to work, like life is continuing. An acquaintance of mine, not even one of my like close girlfriends, showed up at my door with 2 Starbucks. And she was like, let's go for a walk. I didn't have the energy or even the wherewithal to say no, right? So I literally put on my shoes, grabbed my jacket, grabbed the Starbucks, and we just walked. All these years later, I think of that, and that was just, I don't even know that we talked about Jake. I don't know that we walked, and I had a coffee. And it was so simple, but it wasn't that like, what can I do for you? What do you need? Because I didn't know how to answer that. We already had people dropping us off food and doing, like we had the meal train. We had all of those things.
Sure.
But this was just, I opened the door and there it was. And it was, I try to do it when I know other people are in that situation because I know the impact that had.
Just someone offering to be with you and walk beside you, literally or figuratively.
Literally, yes. And not making me come up with it, like really literally just,
right.
You know what I mean? Like not having me solve the issue.
The other question I have is just about being a nonprofit leader, and you're obviously a fundraiser. So what keeps you, I always say I'm a shameless asker, going back to some of our amazing donors and asking for a little bit more for this, specific thing, whether for a retreat, the next book, scholarships, or even like, is there anybody that I should be reaching out to that would care about our cause? Like, how do you keep yourself going as a fundraiser?
That is an excellent question. And I will say we actually have just pivoted that a little bit post-pandemic. In the beginning years of Jake's Help from Heaven, we had an annual event, and it was like our landmark event, and it was our number one fundraiser. I always wanted to stop doing our fundraising event while we were still selling out, making a ton of money, being successful. And the pandemic hit, which kind of happened as I was starting to think that it was time for us to pivot. So we have not had a fundraising event for a couple of years now. And what we do is we do an annual campaign around Jake's birthday, which is when the fundraising event, we had started the fundraising event. So it sort of would be like a birthday party for him. That's kind of what we thought was the idea of it. So now we do an annual birthday campaign. It's a hustle and it's work, and it's always, it's exactly what fundraising is. If you believe in the work, if you believe that we're making a difference, we are creating opportunities for those with disabilities to thrive. And if you believe in that, then this is how you help us.
So great. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I am so pleased to have received your book, to connected with you, I know that there are so many families I work with who will benefit from your website and your podcast and all of these things. So I'm just so grateful to have met you. So thank you. Thank you for doing the work you do and for being a part of this community and a leading force in this community.
Oh, Heather, I'm so grateful for you too. I just think, it's remarkable to me that even though you've lost Jake, here you are 14 years later doing this work and serving and loving and helping. Just thank you. I am very touched by that. And I think it's remarkable. I loved our conversation so much.
No, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to A Place of Yes. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you really like this episode, please share it with a friend. It would make a world of difference if we could just reach more people and share the work that we do and the stories we want to tell. Thank you so much for watching.